Hi, it's Christine Daigle.
I'm Jena Brown.
And I'm JD Barker. Welcome to Writers Inc. So before we get going, I have a quick question for you two. What do you
Okay.
prefer, hardcovers or paperbacks when you buy a new
Oh,
Hardcover.
book?
that's such
Hardcover.
a mean question, JD, because so I like hardcover, as you can tell, because they're gorgeous on a bookshelf. But like actually reading, I prefer a paperback, but not mass market paperback, like the bigger, floppier paperbacks.
Yeah, see,
Okay,
I'm
so
with you. I
I
want a hardcover for my shelf too. Here's my sacrilege. I usually don't read them. I usually read electronically, but I want the
I've
copy too.
I've done that, like I find a book that I like and I listen to the audiobook or whatever, but then I buy
Yeah.
the hardcover for the shelf. The reason, first of all, I put that out on Twitter. I think I got like 200 responses and it was 53% hardcover, which makes sense there. But I'm looking at it more from a business standpoint because one of the things that I am noticing with bookstores is when you have a title come out, and like publishers don't really talk about this, but the title comes out in a hardcover. And the bookstore will stock it. But as soon as you list the paperback for sale, they return the hardcovers in lieu of the paperback coming later because they can,
Mm.
it's a cheaper sell and they sell more of them. And from what I'm being told, like over time, like the paperback is the one that actually lingers on the shelves. So if you see a book that's, been out for
Mhm.
5, 6, 7 years or whatever, it's most likely going to be the paperback on the shelf. So I'm debating on my side, like out of all these titles I've got coming out, which ones do I want to do hardcover and which ones do I want to do paperback? Because I originally went into it thinking, well, I'll just do all of them, hardcover, and then 6 months later I'll release the paperback and just go with it. But I'm thinking that it might make sense to release some of them as, paperback straight out of the gate and not put out a hardcover at all. So I've been
So I do
researching that.
think that's actually kind of smart because, as I said, I prefer reading the paperback. I do like that paperbacks are generally less expensive. And so if it's a book I'm not sure of, like a new author, maybe, like I might be more likely to buy a paperback. And I think that the one thing I've noticed publishers are doing more is books that tend to be popular, they'll do a special edition book. So I think if you released something with a paperback and it was doing well, you could then go back and do a special edition hardcover with like, either like the stained edges or like, some cool and something that makes it stand out. And that might be an interesting way to have your cake and eat it too. I don't know, but that's kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah, so I might grab like a random co-author title and put it out as a paperback only just to see what happens. And for the record, it won't be one of you guys because I
Good.
don't
As
want you
long
to
as
think of
mine comes out in
everybody.
hardcover, I'm happy.
That's the thing. Like everybody wants the hardcover, right? And like I know I've always wanted that for my books, which is why I didn't even think about it before. But now I'm looking at it from a business standpoint,
Yeah.
which kind of flips it all on its head.
As long as it's
So
Kevin, we're all fine. So,
yeah, we'll try it with Kevin's. We'll put his out in paperback first.
Let's talk special editions. This might be interesting. I don't know. That's interesting.
yeah.
So I am not going to be here next week. I am heading off to Budapest of all places.
Budapest. Is this
What's
a
going on in
Dracula
Budapest.
Budapest?
reboot?
There
Are you
there
writing more Dracula stories?
No, there is a book festival that I'm going to behind the closed doors on pre-order there, and it's doing really well. So they wanted to fly me out there, and it's going to be fun, but it's going to be taxing because I think I'm in the air for 17 hours, then I'm on the ground for like a day and a half, and then another 17 hours back. And
Wow.
like publishers, when I do these trips, like they really pack that schedule tight. Like there's no time to deal with jet lag or any of that stuff. Like I typically get off the plane and they rush me into an interview and like it's like a nonstop thing because they've only got me for so much time. They want to take advantage of it. But the book is doing well. Like they just sent me a pre-order list, and it's actually outselling Sarah J. Maas and Stephen King and a few other names that I recognized, which is kind of amazing. And I shot it over to King just to chide him a little bit, and he sent me a snarky response back. But yeah, so Budapest, you guys will be on your own with Kevin, so behave.
Well, we'll try, but no
What?
promises.
Behave?
Yeah.
Always behave.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
I feel like
I
I'm
mean,
leaving
we
the
might
kids
just
without a
be
sitter.
AI next week. I don't know. I saw Google Notebook is coming out with it's able to turn your notes into a podcast with fake hosts and banter. So we're finished maybe. We might not even show up next week. I don't know.
I don't know. I've seen some of the results of this miraculous AI, and I'm not sure that they can pull that off quite yet.
I was playing with one of those the other day, and it's basically a talking head. So you just put whatever script you want in there, and it'll read it off as if it's a reporter or just, like these were TikTok form videos. So, a person just standing there with a microphone and just kind of rattling it off. And like they physically looked, you couldn't tell the difference. It looked like a human being. It sounded like a human being, but the intonation and the voice just wasn't there. And I couldn't find a way to actually tweak it. But that kind of stuff is getting a little, we talk about it every week, and like every week it gets freakier and freakier. I mean, after the debate with Trump's, message about cats and dogs being eaten, like I have seen so many videos of cats, dressed up in like full on, riot gear and stuff, storming with machine guns, and like or whatever, like it looks real, and it's
I think Anne
obviously
did
not.
a good job with, like, from the video perspective, if there's no talking, so like just brief clips where it's just sort of animated a little bit, but not like, it kind of loses it if you try to make it like talk or a long clip. But yeah, it's gonna get wild. We're gonna live in a future where you're not gonna be able to believe anything that you don't see in real life. And then they're gonna put neural links in our brains, and we're never gonna believe anything that happens ever again because we won't know. So
I don't believe any of it now as it is. So, speaking of non-believing, what is in the news? You
oh,
are the
all
official
right.
Kevin stand-in.
Yes, hello. I will try
Oh, and
to.
Kevin is away at Nink, by the way, which is why he's not here. So if you're at Nink, and say hi to Kevin. Well, I guess
Yeah.
you'd have to travel back in time by the time this airs, but
Oh, well, that's true. Yeah. Well, hopefully someone is giving him appropriate grief. All right. In the news, publishers try skinnier books to save money and emissions. A typical paperback book contributes around 1 kilogram of carbon dioxide, with 767 million sold in the US in 2023 alone. To reduce emissions, some publishers are exploring methods like using thinner paper and optimizing the typesetting of books. HarperCollins and companies like 2K Denmark are leading initiatives in sustainable typesetting by tweaking typefaces to fit more on each page without compromising readability. The project, Sustainable Serif, offers up to 50% page reductions, which could lead to significant cost and carbon savings. Despite the advantages, the change involves careful balance, particularly for different genres and books like art collections, where heavier paper and design quality remain important. So that's
hmm,
kind of
I
interesting.
It is.
I don't know. I don't mind the typeset because the article actually came with like an example. And so I don't think the readability is an issue, but I have gotten books before where it's got like that really thin paper in a hardcover. And I don't know that I like it.
I personally I would rather have the thin paper than a smaller font. Like I was at
Yeah,
the eye doctor yesterday because I'm having trouble like reading certain size text, and like I refuse to get reading glasses. Like I just don't want to go there. So I'm like, just do LASIK again. And they're like, we can't do it again. You're gonna have to deal, as you both you both have your glasses on.
yes.
Um, the paper thing is a funny thing. Like I have a book and I was going to try to find it, where it's 312 pages. It's a hardcover, but they actually use thick paper to make it seem like it was bigger. Yeah, so like they've gone the other direction, and I know publishers have played with this before to try and make books look a certain way.
Yeah.
Thinner paper I've seen before, with longer ones. Like if you pick up a copy of it, most likely it's going to be printed on thinner paper just because they've got limitations on binding and stuff. Um, I, I can see why they're fooling around with it from this standpoint too. I don't know that that's the real reason though. To me, it feels more like a cost saving thing more than a
Everything is
carbon saving
always
thing.
a cost saving thing. I mean, I like that. I think that's great, but usually, that's a PR spin on stuff too. Look, we're saving the
That
environment,
that
but also this is cheap.
that's it. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
spin, right? They're just
Yeah.
we're
Yeah, yeah. But I'm with you. Like I don't want smaller type font. But I mean, if it's just that the font itself fits together differently and it's the same size, I guess that would be okay. Or, I'll just blow it up
Yeah,
to
it was like an
20-point
interesting
font on
thing.
my Kindle, which is also okay.
They kept so the capital letters stay the same size in this thing, and it's the lowercase that actually increases. And so I guess what that does is it still makes it readable to the eye. Their example was pretty interesting. So I think we usually put these links in the in the notes. It was pretty interesting because I was kind of skeptical, and then I saw it laid out on the page and I was like, well, yeah, it actually makes it seem fine.
They're
So
going to start coming with magnifying glasses.
well, I know this is all just go on this little thing. I saw Book Riot sent out an email that had new wearable tech, and they're like glasses that go on that you can adjust. It's like a computer screen inside the glasses, and you can adjust it to so you don't need to wear your glasses or contacts, and you can read a book. So that's like the next e-reader. So there you go. I guess
There you go. Magnifying glasses. I said it.
You said it first. Authors Guild reaches agreement with troubled TouchPoint Press. Independent publisher TouchPoint Press has officially shut down due to ongoing financial and operational struggles, confirmed by a letter from publisher Sherry Williams. She cited pressure from authors, staff, and external entities like the Arkansas Attorney General's Office and the Authors Guild. Williams disclosed her efforts to repay back royalties, including filing a business insurance claim. If the claim is denied, a repayment plan overseen by the Authors Guild will be established. Rights to published works will be reverted to authors, and cover and interior files will be returned. Complaints against Touchstone Press date back to 2015, with ongoing issues like communication breakdowns, missed payments, and publication delays. An investigation was launched earlier this year by the Arkansas Attorney General, and one author won a lawsuit against the publisher in 2023 due to the publisher being unresponsive. So some closure and still some questions, which feels like many legal issues.
It just feels like another reminder that I probably should join the Authors Guild at some point. Are either of you a member of the Authors Guild?
I'm not. I don't.
I get their email newsletter, which I think comes in almost every day, and read through it just to try to stay on top of certain topics. But no, I've dialed that kind of thing back.
I always feel like
Were
I
you
should
a
probably
member of
have
it at
some kind
point?
of legal protection as a writer, but I don't.
Yeah, no, initially I signed up for I was part of the Authors Guild. I'm part of IBPA, which is the Independent Book Publishers Association. That one I still do. I was with ITW, I was with the Horror Writers Association. I just kind of signed up for absolutely everything. But I just found that I was just spreading myself too thin, because then, some of these organizations ask you to participate and I always agree, and then I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And there's only 28 hours in the day or whatever there actually is. So I had to trim some stuff back. But it's a great resource, especially on the legal side when you need to, research this type of thing, or if you get in trouble.
Yeah, that does. I mean, it sounds like they stepped in and really kind of pressured between them and the state attorney general. So yeah, hopefully it all works out and people get paid and we can move on with that chapter. Simon & Schuster's Children's imprint signs first look deal with Foundation Media Partners. Simon & Schuster's Children's has signed a first look deal with Foundation Media Partners to develop film and TV projects based on their children's titles, particularly from their Little Simon chapter books and graphic novels library. Foundation Media will explore both animated and live action adaptations of these popular children's books. So it looks like another first look deal. These are becoming pretty typical, it seems, for imprints.
Yeah, it was Entangled last time we talked about, right? So
Yeah.
Entangled and now Simon & Schuster Children.
And
seems like
did
it's
someone
becoming
have
a
it
thing.
before Entangled? I don't remember.
I think it's just getting more common because everybody's just trying to streamline. Profit margins are getting a little bit tighter. And just by working together, they can get more product out there. They're realizing, rather than, holding up, typically what ends up happening is a book is finished, you hold it up, all these different studios bid on it, which takes forever. Then, you may get an offer, then you've got to negotiate a contract, and all this stuff could take 6 months to a year. And when you've got a lot of volume, it just doesn't make sense to keep doing that over and over again. So if you can agree on some type of terms, and just eliminate, the paperwork and the headaches of it, just streamline the process, it makes sense for everybody. And everybody's looking for content. On the children's side, I mean, it's a huge market if you can get into it. There's tons of channels, and with streaming now and everything the way that it is, they're going to be filling those forever.
Yeah, and it does seem smart from that, streaming content too. Because if you know that you have a publisher that you love and it's always going to be they're going to have a majority of their work on a certain streaming platform, you're probably going to subscribe. So,
Well, children's streaming it is kind of unique, and I stumbled into this only because I have a daughter. But little kids tend to watch the same shows over and over again.
Mhm.
An adult might watch one program straight through. You watch the 8 episodes and you're done, and it's forgotten and gone. But kids will watch that same episode, 5, 10, 15 times, let alone seasons over and over again.
Yeah.
And the people behind that get paid, basically based on those watches. So it's almost like having 10 different series out there just because it's being watched 10 times. So children's programming in a lot of ways is actually a lot more profitable than adult programming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can attest to that, having watched probably the entire SpongeBob and Jimmy Neutron archive when Kyle was younger.
Better than Thomas the Train. Anyway, JD, who is up this week?
This week, we've got John Gaspard coming on. John is the award-winning author of the Eli Marks and Como Lake Players mystery series. He's also a screenwriter and filmmaker, and he's here to explain why we need to study film if we really want to write a good book. So here he is, John Gaspard.
Okay. So you recently published the third book in your Popcorn Principles series that helps fiction writers add cinematic techniques to their work. I'd love to chat about a few of your key lessons.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just give you a little background on where they came from. Before I was a novel writer, and I've written one 9-book cozy mystery series and another 3-book cozy mystery series and some standalones. I was a filmmaker, independent filmmaker, made about half dozen low-budget features, and wrote a couple books on that process, on what it's like to do that, and then was asked by the publisher to interview other low-budget filmmakers and other filmmakers who had good ideas. Ended up interviewing about 100 filmmakers and writing a couple of filmmaking books with people like Steven Soderbergh and George Romero and Roger Corman, and talking about their techniques for making great movies. And as I got deeper into novel writing, I realized that I was using a lot of the techniques that I had learned as a screenwriter, or that I had heard from these different filmmakers. I was using those same techniques in writing my novels in order to make them more fast-paced, more engaging, make people want to read further. And so I jotted down 25 of them, and that became the first Popcorn Principles book, in which there's 25 different techniques that screenwriters use that novelists can use as well. Some of them are actually, if you've been doing it for a while, pretty basic. The concept of, with a scene, that you want to enter a scene as late as possible, and you want to leave it as early as possible. And the example that one filmmaker told me was, think of a scene as a party, and you don't want to be the first person at the party. You want to get to the party when it's up and running, hit it at a high point, and then leave that party before it dwindles out. And that's the same way we would approach a good scene. You just jump right into it, and then you jump out of it. You don't wait for the cleaning crew to come and clean up. So that's a fairly basic one. Another one that comes up again and again in movies is what screenwriters and TV writers call callbacks. And that's planting something early in the story that you pay off later. And in mysteries, we do that all the time, but you can do that in any kind of storytelling where there's something that seems perhaps innocuous that's mentioned or presented early on that comes back in a new way. A couple good examples of that are, there's a little movie called Stuber, Stuber. Great movie? No, not really. Nice little movie. But early on, they play around with the idea that this guy has an electric car and that it is silent. No one mentions it again for 80 minutes. And then the fact that his car is silent becomes a very big thing at the end. That's a great callback. Probably the most famous for me callback is in the movie Casablanca, where early in the movie they're looking for whoever it was who killed the courier who had the letters of transit. And Claude Rains, the chief of police, says, "Round up the usual suspects." And that gets a laugh. Then at the end of the movie, Humphrey Bogart has shot the bad Nazi. I'm sorry, the Nazi. I don't think there's any good ones. And Claude Rains is in the position of, what does he do right now? His policemen approach him. They see the dead body. He says, "Colonel Strasser has been shot." I'm sorry, Major Strasser has been shot. And there's a pause. And then he says, "Round up the usual suspects," which means he's not going to confess that Humphrey Bogart did it.
Yeah.
That callback is great, but also the way it was found was great because it was not planned. The movie was written kind of as it was shot, and two brothers, the Epstein brothers, were brought in to write the last quarter of the movie. And they got to that scene where Humphrey Bogart shoots Major Strasser and Claude Rains is standing there. And what do you do? And they couldn't figure out how does the chief of police get his friend off and not let him be arrested for this. And as they're driving to work one day, driving to the studio, one of them turns to the other one and they say at the same time, round up the usual suspects. And that's something we can forget when we're writing, which is we have planted things earlier in the book that would really benefit us and surprise readers to pay them off. I had a screenwriting teacher who called it organic writing, which is when you get to the end, you don't necessarily need to add anything. Just go back into the garden that you planted and see what's there and let that be the payoff. So those are a couple of favorite ones. There's, like I said, there's 25 different ones. And then I realized that I left off a few, so I did a sequel to that. And then the third book that just came out, one of the things I heard from people was, well, we liked the principles, we liked the little lessons you put at the end of each principle saying, try this, try that. Can you give us some more prompts, basically writing prompts for each of the ideas? So that's what the third book is. And it's a really just a workbook. It recaps ideas and then gives you 10 or 12 different approaches you can take for your own novel writing. Some of them will work, some of them won't. It's not one size fits all, but there's enough good ideas in there that I think, regardless of where you are in your career, if as you page through it, you go, oh, I forgot about that, or oh, I should try that.
Yeah, and it's funny to hear you say that. I want to just touch on some of the things you said with the pacing, because I was actually talking to a friend about this who had a comment about the pacing, and I'm like, oh, I can help you with that. And that's basically what it is. Let's look at the beginning and the end of your chapter and cut some off because it probably doesn't need to be there. And that helps increase pacing, right? So I love that tip. And I think, screenwriting and novel writing have so much in common, probably more than they don't. The first craft book I remember reading was Story by Robert McKee, which was for screenwriters. It took me a long time to figure out a lot of what he was saying through trial and error to apply to my work. But yeah, definitely the callback, not taking a sledgehammer to your work, but just going in with a scalpel and fixing a couple things. I think a lot of times writers get to the end and they're like, oh no, all this needs to change. And usually you can just drop in a few sentences here and there to make that work. So I want to talk more about your tips. So pacing, is that your biggest tip for pacing, or do you have other kind of thoughts on how to get the pacing correct?
Yeah, there's a screenwriter I know who used the expression, don't spill all your popcorn in the lobby. And in further examination, what he meant by that was there is a tendency to want to tell everything up front. In the first chapter, you have to tell everything. And his point was, no, you just hang on to your popcorn and deliver things along the way. Tell them what they need to know and not everything at once. The interesting thing about screenwriting is when you're writing a screenplay, for example, with description, you are only writing enough so that whoever the department head is for that department can read it and figure out what to take from there. You're not telling them every single thing. And I think readers are very much the same way. They're the department heads of the book they're reading. Jasper Fforde, the writer of many amazingly funny books, one of the books, I forget which one it is now, has the concept that books expand the more people read them, and that readers are bringing their own ideas to it and their own pictures of it. The basic example of that is when Harry Potter came out, and I have a friend to this day who says that Daniel Radcliffe does not look like Harry Potter. And in her mind, he didn't. He was not the Harry Potter that she read in the book. And readers do that. They are creating their own narrative with you. And so you don't have to tell them everything. I think it was William Faulkner who said, just cut out the parts that people skip over. And that's just the best lesson is they will fill in the details. give them enough so they can have an imaginative journey.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Going back and looking to see, is this filler? Do I need this? And if it's not, cut it. That also helps increase pacing. I also kind of want to ask about the opposite of that. Because I think one of the biggest compliments you can get as a writer is I love it when people is like, oh, your storytelling is so cinematic. And I've thought a bit about what that means. And I think it's just that it's very visually easy to picture, which is kind of the opposite of what you've said. So I'm curious what tips you have for visual storytelling about that balance between not telling too much, but also making it visually vivid.
Yeah, you don't need to spend 2 pages describing a tree, basically.
Yeah. Unless you're Tolkien.
Yes, that's what we have metaphor for. There's a great book that all writers should read by William Goldman called Adventures in the Screen Trade. And in it, he talks about the different screenplays he wrote, like All the President's Men and Butch Cassidy, and but also the encounters he's had with people while making those movies. And one of the encounters he had was with the director George Roy Hill, who directed Butch Cassidy and also The Sting and World According to Garp and other classics. And George Roy Hill pointed out that one of the sentences in a script said, "The room smelled of gun oil." And his response was, as a reader, you've told me everything I need to know about that room. As a filmmaker, you need to help me out a little bit more because I've got to shoot this. But the reader fills in all the gaps that they need with something like that. And something that simple can be all you need. In screenplays, they literally don't have a lot of space. The script has to be 120 pages. If an executive is reading a script and it's densely filled with words, they're going to flip past stuff and miss things. And so as a screenwriter, you have to find very smart, clever, quick ways of doing that. And that those same techniques, I think novelists can use. I recommend all the time, if you want to write better, faster paced, more engaging novels, you should sit down and read a screenplay. Read a William Goldman screenplay and see how he has very economically told the reader everything they need to know and let the reader fill in the rest. Yeah,
that's a great tip. So you also talk in your book about how to make our characters more dynamic.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is turning into the William Goldman hour, but one of the things that he said that I found so interesting was make sure your characters have a secret and reveal it at a later point. The most classic example with Goldman was that the Sundance Kid can't swim, which makes for a great scene and conflict and tension and humor, all because he withheld that information until that point. And that's what made it a classic scene. Sticking with Robert Redford, if you look at the movie The Sting, Robert Redford has a secret that we, the audience, know, which is that he was involved with the original crime that starts everything in process, and he has a very personal reason why they want to get Robert Shaw. But they also give him what appears to be another secret, which is that it appears that he is now working with the FBI to bring in Paul Newman at the end of the movie. He's going to turn on Paul Newman, and it's a very well planted secret. We, as the audience members, see that it's a secret, and then we find out that it's not the secret we thought at the very end. I don't know if I've probably given away too much of this thing, but it's 40 years old. So
yeah, and spoilers are too bad if you haven't seen it already.
Exactly. So keep that in the back of your mind as you're writing. What can I reveal about this person later on that will add depth to their characterization, that will surprise the audience, but that will also be completely in keeping with everything and perhaps explain some things along the way. Again, it goes back to don't spill all your popcorn in the lobby.
Yeah.
To dole these things out. I have a 9-book series about a magician who solves crimes, and we're still learning stuff about characters in book 9 that readers are surprised to find that out, but it just makes perfect sense and is completely congruent with everything that's come before it. You just don't have to tell them everything at once.
Yeah. And I do love the dramatic irony, when you know something, the character knows, but the people around them don't know. That's when you're screaming at your screen or your book, like, no, don't do that, because you have that knowledge and other characters don't. So I think that's a great tip.
Yes, and that Robert Redford secret, because we are misled in the sting,
Hmm.
and we put things on that aren't there. There's a shot of Robert Redford, I think, sitting on a stoop at night, and there's a slow version of one of the Scott Joplin rags playing that Marvin Hamlish did. And you look at Robert Redford, and he looks so guilty because he's going to betray his friend. And then you find out the truth of that, and you watch the movie a second time. He doesn't look guilty at all. He's just sitting there. He's just sitting there. But he has shaded our feeling of what's happening. And you're doing the same thing when readers go through it and go, oh, for example, if you get through, I won't say which one, but one of the Agatha Christie books in which the narrator is the murderer, everything turns at that point, and it's a great surprise. But if you read it a second time, it's like, well, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Surprising but inevitable seems so
Yeah.
important in fiction. What do you think about plot twists? How can we do that well? What is too little, too many, too ridiculous? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you have to be judicious, and you have to plan them, unless you're, a really, really, really good writer. And I would look to someone like Lawrence Block, who writes the burglar mysteries, the Bernie Rodenbar murder burglar mysteries, which I believe he sort of is a discovery writer in those, and makes them up as he goes along, and makes up the twists as he goes along, and writes himself into a corner, and then has to write himself out of a corner. That's sort of a challenge. It was like you said earlier, it's got to be surprising but inevitable, so that when it is revealed, you go, I can't imagine it having gone any other way, as opposed to, well, that's just stupid. A great example is The Sixth Sense, in which there's the reveal at the end that Bruce Willis's situation is not what we thought. And it's inevitable, because they even do a flashback, so you can kind of remember and go, oh, yes, that was inevitable. There's a great little movie called The Illusionist, with Paul Giamatti as a detective in, I don't know, Vienna or something in the 1800s. And there's a point at the end of the movie where he's standing on the platform of a train station, and he's remembering the key images that he witnessed, and he's realizing how he got each one of them wrong. And the twist is that you are with him at that very moment. You are learning at the exact same moment he is. And I think readers really like either being a half a step ahead of the main character who's solving something, or being right with them. But I think they get a little annoyed with the detective who says in the book, I went to the library, looked some things up, and then I gathered all the suspects together. And the answer is something is certainly logical, but you never could have figured it out.
Right.
I think readers like a twist that is inevitable, but still jumps out and surprises them. And those are hard. Those are really hard.
They are hard. And I think, readers are just so astute now. It's hard to find something that's both interesting and authentic, and to get that balance. Do you like a lot of little twists along the way, or one big twist, or a combination of both, or does it depend?
I'm sort of the fan of the two twists, of the twist where our hero seems to have solved everything, and then the twist on top of that where he or she finds out that while that was sort of correct, there was one thing that they missed, and because it puts them in a point of jeopardy, as you can't do it so much in an ebook, although you can sort of follow how much is left. And when you're holding a book in your hand, and your detective solves it in chapter 19, and there's still 4 more chapters, you go, either there's a lot of padding here, or he hasn't really solved it. And what did he miss, and what did I miss? And I think people like that sort of jump step where it's like, oh, we got it. Oh, we didn't. And we have to rethink it. But again, those are hard to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other tips I missed from your books and popcorn principles that you think
Oh boy.
writers
Let
should
me
know?
There's a chapter I called "There's No Shame in Reshooting." There are some filmmakers who will set aside part of their budget for 2 or 3 days of reshoots after they've done the initial edit of the movie. There's a movie called Swingers that was written by Jon Favreau and stars Jon Favreau, but was directed by a guy named Doug Liman. And I think they had 20 days of shooting. And he said, okay, we're going to shoot it in 18. I'm keeping 2 days so that when I put the movie together, I can go back and fix things. I'm going to take big swings. If it doesn't work, I need to have 2 days to fix it. And we can do that too. There's a tendency when you type the end to go, okay, that's done. When in fact, you should test it with some readers. You should let it sit in a drawer for a while. And then come back in and say, I need to do a little bit of reshooting here. I don't necessarily need to do major surgery, but some minor surgery is really going to clean things up. And I know that it's when you get to the end, it's like, okay, I don't really want to deal with this ever again. But if you take the time and do that next draft, looking at what can I redo that's going to make this better, it serves you in all kinds of ways and makes people enjoy the book that much more. And that ties into the idea of previews. Some filmmakers hate previews, some love them. Novelists should be doing the same thing. Try the book out on a couple people, get some reactions. There's a filmmaker named Amy Holden Jones who wrote Mystic Pizza, An Indecent Proposal. And she said, I'll give a script to 5 people. And if one person has a problem with something, the other 4 don't, I don't worry about it. But if 4 come back with the same problem, I know I have a problem.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier to fix it at that point rather than when you start reading Amazon reviews and go, oh boy, they are right about that, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always difficult after the first draft because you start tinkering with things and you're like, am I just making this worse?
Yeah.
So once you have your beta readers and you're going back in, how do you feel like get the trim fat, add more, depends on the writer? What are you doing to make it better versus making it more of a mess?
Right. I had a great chat with a guy named Kenny Lonergan who wrote You Can Count on Me and Gangs in New York. And he's a great filmmaker and a great playwright. And he said the real secret to rewriting is knowing when to stop. Because you can do so much damage and you do have to just give yourself a certain amount of time. It's like the story of the 2nd grade art teacher where the parent says, all the students are Picassos. How do you do that? And she says, I just know when to take it away from them. And that's the real tricky thing, is finding the point where you go, okay, I could chip away at this forever. I have solved all the problems. I need to call this done and move on.
Yeah.
Because there's some filmmakers who will spend years, literally years, cutting and recutting and cutting and recutting and cutting and recutting.
Yeah.
And at some point you have to just go, no, it's as done as it's going to be. Yeah.
My gut check is usually, am I cringing? Because if the cringing is stopping, then I'm done. It's time to move on. There's no more cringe when I read something. It's good enough.
Yes. The cringe factor is a very good one.
Yeah.
The other one that I'll just give you that it's sort of an odd one, but it comes up in all portions of life for me. I was talking to Bob Odenkirk, who is Saul in Better Call Saul, and who's also a writer and a filmmaker. And he made a great little movie called Melvin Goes to Dinner. And I said, what's the one piece of advice you would give people? And he said, I would say, don't hesitate to hesitate. And I, of course, said, what do you mean? And he said, well, in filmmaking terms, you're shooting a scene, you've covered all the angles, you've got all the takes. There's a tendency to want to tear everything down and move on to the next thing. And the fact is, you're not going to be back here again. Take a moment, step back, hesitate, look around and say, what else can I do while I'm here? And that idea of being okay about hesitating, you don't want to do that forever, but before you finish the book, step back and just take a moment, put it in a drawer for 2 weeks, and then look at it again. Because you can finish a book and put it into vellum and format it and throw the cover on and click a button and 5 minutes later it's on Amazon. Just because you can do that doesn't mean you should.
Right.
And that idea of don't hesitate to hesitate, take a moment, let things settle, let your brain chemistry change a little bit and come back and look at it one more time.
Yeah, I think that's so important that you need to forget what was in your head when you're writing it. It
Yep.
usually takes about a month for me before I've forgotten the story, because otherwise there are things in your head that are not on the page or
Yep.
there are things that you're missing. So I think that's such a great tip. I also want to talk a little bit about your podcast, Behind the Page.
Okay.
Yeah, I know you talk a bit about leveraging audiobooks and things like that to help build an audience. I'd love to hear more about that.
Sure. Well, I have, as I said, I have a 9-book series called the Eli Marks Mystery Series. 9 cozy mysteries, kind of funny, kind of wacky. And I am very lucky to have a close friend who's a professional narrator. That's what he does for his living. He does it for corporate things, live. He does it, audiobooks, that sort of thing. And he said we should do the audiobooks for the Eli Marks series. And as it turns out, it was a really good idea because he is the perfect voice for the Eli Marks series. And I hear that from listeners all the time. There is no better narrator for this series than Jim Cunningham. A few years ago when I was back in the corporate world, we did a big study on free. What does free mean to people? And what value is there in free? We were working with the banking industry, and banking industry shot itself in the foot by making checking free. And they're trying to figure out a way around that. And I thought, I like the idea of free. I think that builds a readership. It builds a listenership. So what can I do to give these audiobooks away for free? And I thought, well, I'll do a podcast. And there's 24 chapters in the first book. We'll do 24 episodes, one every 2 weeks, one every twice a month. And I thought, well, we should give them a little more value than that. So I thought, we'll interview someone who has something to do with that chapter or somewhere involved in the entertainment industry, because Eli is a magician. And that turned into Behind the Page, the Eli Marks Podcast, where twice a month, listeners can download the podcast. They hear an interview with someone involved in magic or entertainment or something like we've had Dick Cavett, we had the amazing Kreskin, we've had Teller from Penn and Teller. And then they hear a chapter of the book. So over the course of one full season, 24 episodes, they'll hear the entire first book. And then in season 2, they hear the second book. And I had some writers say, well, you're just giving away. You're losing sales. When in fact, I think it was just the opposite. My audiobook sales quadrupled after like the first half year, because people wanted to hear the rest of the book and they wanted to hear the other books. And they still listen to the podcast. I've had a lot of listeners write in and say, I heard the books before, I'm listening to them again on the podcast. I love them, and I love the interviews, and I love the banter. So it was a way of getting the books to a different audience that didn't cost anything. There's no advertising costs. I'm using the same setup we're using right now for the Zoom interviews. Editing is free because I'm doing it. So it's an absolutely no cost way of marketing the books. And not only are people enjoying them, but they tell their friends, which is the thing you want them to do. They tell their friends, you should listen to this. And it's proven to be, it's a lot of work. As you know, producing a podcast is not as simple as it looks. And apparently, statistically, most people give up after episode 7 of producing a podcast.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. We're in our 4th season, and just the other day recorded, I can't say who it is, but it's one of the biggest names we've ever had in TV. That'll be our surprise guest at the end of the year. And it's also fun. It's just great conversations with interesting people. I'm lucky because the magic world is small. So I can send an email to Teller and say, do you want to be on the podcast? I can reach out to people, and they're mostly pretty good about it. But it's also just a fun conversation. And it's proven to be a weirdly warm, engaging way to market the books.
I think that's so smart. I've seen this done a couple other ways, not with the audiobooks, but with, writers who will give away the chapters for free on their websites, and they'll be up, for that day or week, and then they take it down. So you can technically get it all free, piecemeal, or blogs, nonfiction. And people are like, why are you going to do that? But then people will go and buy the books, the nonfiction books, because they want it all together. Or they want it faster. Um, I think that's brilliant. And then you're giving added content and you're creating community, which I think is so important right now for authors with all this AI stuff that I'm not going to mention coming out. Um, yeah, I think that's wonderful. So what a great idea and great tip.
It's been a great experience. It's like you mentioned, the process of giving a book away for free. But it's a step up from that
Yeah.
because, I have thousands of people in my newsletter, but I think about a third of them are actual fans, and the other two-thirds are people who got a book for free.
hmm
And some people just like amassing books for free, and they're never going to read your stuff. But it didn't cost anything for them to get it for free. It's not costing you anything. The people who listen to the podcast they're in. They are in, and they are patiently or impatiently waiting for the next one.
Fans for life. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. Just as we're wrapping up here, I know for your popcorn principles, you have a 30-minute free video course that listeners can go check out. Do you want to
I
tell us
do.
about that? Yeah.
Sure. It covers the first 6 principles in the popcorn principles in kind of a fun, light way, way of bringing those ideas to life. And you can get that at thepopcornprinciples.com. That's thepopcornprinciples.com. Just go there and click on the video course. And it's just a fun way to introduce yourself to the ideas of the book and see if there's anything in there for you. I think new writers might be intimidated, like how do I do this? How do I do this? And it gives you some good tips on just things to think about while you're writing. And for seasoned writers, I think it offers some good reminders of things we might have forgotten to do that will just help make the books a little bit better.
Yeah. Wonderful.
And it's free.
Yeah. You can't beat that. Fantastic. All right. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Christine.
Okay. I have to know if anyone else like me is also freaked out by electric cars and their silence.
I honestly am, and like I talk about these runs that I do every day. I live on an island, like it's pretty quiet as far as traffic goes. Like I can sometimes go halfway through my run and not see a car. But a lot of the residents on this island have Teslas, and yeah, they are completely quiet. And like I don't know that one is coming up behind me until it's already passing me, and that really freaks me out, knowing what happened to Stephen King. Like I don't want to get whacked by a car, let alone a Tesla. Like if it was a cool car, it would be one thing, but I don't want my tombstone to say taken out by Tesla.
What about a Cybertruck?
That's even worse. We saw one the other day and my daughter pointed at it and she was like almost disgusted. At 7 years old, she's looking at it, it's like, what is that?
You just tell her
that,
a
I think, tells you
DeLorean
all you.
exploded and it's going to a Mad Max world, and there you go.
It does
Yeah,
look
like
like
a
a DeLorean in a Mad Max world. That I'm never going to get that imagery out of my head. Thank you, Christine.
You are very welcome. I'm glad I'm not the only one. I am scared of electric cars.
I don't know. We live all the way on the edge of Vegas, and it used to be very quiet with very few cars. And unfortunately, there are now more cars. And so when we go on our nightly walk, they're quite noisy sometimes, depending on what time of the evening we go through. So I don't know if I would hate that some of them were quieter, because we get people who like to amp up their muscle cars, and so they make it like obnoxiously loud, which I think is just as annoying as maybe the silent car, maybe more
Yeah.
annoying. So I don't know. I like the idea of a quiet car in theory. I don't know if I would like it. But we also have sidewalks and things, and then we also live on the desert, so I guess I can just go into the desert if I don't want to.
They sneak up on
you know what
though.
You know what's actually worse? We've got a neighbor who's got an electric Porsche, and like they build sounds into these cars so that you can hear them. So this one, even though it's an electric Porsche, it sounds like it's got a big monster Porsche engine in it. And honestly, like it makes me laugh, because like it goes cruising by, and I'm sure it's ridiculously fast and everything because it's electric, but it sounds like like it's got this big old V8 engine in it, and it doesn't. So it's almost like a souped up golf car that wants to be a Porsche. And yeah, so like that one just makes me laugh.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is. I'm sure there's an answer. I don't know what it is. Maybe someone smarter than me can figure it out.
Yeah. I don't know. Let's talk about some of these popcorn principles. So John talked about using callbacks. So I'm curious, what are some of your favorite callbacks in your own work or in other work?
Ooh. Well, I mean, the Sixth Sense one that he brought up is probably one of the best ever done. Because it makes you want to go back and I know I did go back and watch that movie again, and you see Bruce Willis wearing the same clothes through the whole movie, and you didn't realize it.
Right.
Another one is oh geez, I'm trying to think of the name of it. It's an older movie with Kevin Bacon, and Nev Campbell, Wild Things maybe. Um,
Oh, yeah. The
yeah,
wild
so it's
movie.
it's a pretty wild thriller. But at the end they do all these flashbacks, and it's a good 5 minute sequence or so where they show how the story was actually put together. And it kind of unravels the entire thing, and that one is done extremely well. Usual Suspects, I think, is another one.
Oh,
Um,
that's such a good movie. Oh,
yeah. But I mean, the nice thing is that as an author, like you can write the whole book and then you can go back and throw your callbacks in later, which is what I do 99% of the time. It makes it look like you're a hero, like you were thinking it's back on page 7 when you really weren't.
yeah. I know that I try to do it. I don't know if I can think of an example, because of course it's like those questions, like, what's your favorite book? And then you've never read a book in your life. So like I know that I have one in the book I'm drafting now. I know that I have deliberately tried to put them in. Could I tell you what they are right now, Christine? I could not. So there you go.
Yeah, it's fair enough. I was like, I wrote the question. I can't think
I
of
will
any.
text you
So
at 2 a.m. when I wake up and it occurs to me and I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I did.
well, that was a good callback. Good on me. Um, do you make sure your characters have a secret?
I think they all have secrets. Seems like it.
Yeah. I mean, there's always things that that because right, isn't that sort of like I don't know if I've ever thought of it as a secret, but they always have like sort of a core wound, right? And so like that's the thing that they're protecting, which then leads to them sort of like embracing this lie that they're living that they have to overcome throughout the course of the plot. So I don't know if I've ever looked at that as a secret, but I suppose that is kind of a secret that they have these things that have happened to them, that they reveal in different ways.
Yeah, and then that's like their wants versus their needs, right? There's a external want, but what they need might even be a secret from them because I haven't figured it out yet. Double
Right.
layers.
Yeah.
It's like the
Yes,
inception of secret.
I know. Yeah, secrets are also hard too because like, I think you guys talked a little bit about like, you know, when do you reveal the secret to the other characters, but also to the reader? Because sometimes, that's always kind of tricky. Like sometimes you need to reveal it to the reader so they don't feel frustrated, like that there's something obviously being held back from them. But then sometimes you do, but I do think that Sixth Sense is like a really good example for that because we knew what Bruce Willis knew. And so Bruce Willis didn't know he was a ghost. And so that was a fun like ride to go on with him. And so the reveal for that was perfect. But if he had known and was like sort of holding it back, that probably wouldn't have had the same impact.
Yeah, and that's interesting now. I was just thinking about the Matrix because it's like putting fresh eyes on the world or like a newbie, right? Because the first one was very good because Neil didn't know anything about the world. So you're
Right.
right there with him. Whereas the second and third, like we already knew what the world was. So I think that was half of the problem because you weren't discovering things. You were way ahead of him the whole time on everything that was going on. That was something else John said. He was like, reader should be half a step ahead or right with the character. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, as I say, from my very prolific publishing career, I wholeheartedly agree.
I mean, I know I personally try to piece out the information to the reader so they always feel like they're 1 or 2 pages ahead of wherever the character is. Makes them feel like they're unraveling the story a little bit faster and maybe smarter than the character. And then I do something to kind of completely rip the rug out from underneath them. So it all comes falling apart. But you can use that. I mean, Dan Brown is fantastic at it. You read those books and like you always feel like you've got it figured out, and the character figures out whatever you figured out like one page later, and then it all turns out to be BS, and it goes off in another direction.
Yeah,
Which
that's
again
fun.
is just that a lot of that is done in the editing. Like once you get that first draft of the story done, you can go in and you can feed those kind of things into the story.
Yeah, or at least I even like, Gone Girl was like such a fun read because like you went back and forth so many times on like, did this guy do it? Did he not do it? Like, and because you like learned these like things that he was holding back to the police. And so it was a very fun, like cat and mouse game, almost like with the reader as well as, with the characters. So that one was really fun. I think she did a good job at actually kind of doing both, putting the reader one step ahead and then also keeping you right with the character, because you felt like you knew what was going on, but then you also learned things at the same time that the character learned it. So it's a fun game trying to figure all these things out.
Speaking of callbacks, we've had Gillian Flynn on the show before. So if you're not quite sure what we're talking about, go back and listen to that episode because she describes it and what she did.
Yeah, that's a great idea. John also said that he's a fan of 2 twists. So you get the character where they're sort of correct and have things solved, but oh no, they missed something. How many twists do you like?
I think two is the magic number. Like you kind of know too when you're reading a book and like you've got 120 pages left after you hit that twist, or 2 hours left in the audiobook, something else is big coming. I feel like you need to do another minor one right at the very end, just some kind of got you moment for the readers, so when they close that cover, they're left thinking about it. I don't think I've ever taken a story and completely wrapped it up with a nice little bow and sent it away. In a lot of ways, like you leave room almost for a sequel without leaving too many things wide open.
Yeah. I'm trying to think how many twists. Again, I know nothing about anything that I've written, so.
You will at 2 a.m. I'll look forward to that text. The secret to rewriting is knowing when to stop. How do you know when to stop?
I think it was Harlan Coben that said, like, when you're moving commas around and just swapping punctuation, you're done. But yeah, it never feels like it's 100% finished. It's at some point you have to put it down.
I get like to the point where I am like so sick of it, I could like throw it in the ocean and be perfectly content. And that's when I know, like, okay, at least I'm done for now. Maybe I'll come back to it in a minute and read through it. But yeah, I think when I just hate everything and I think that it's the worst thing in the world, that's usually a sign that I am done editing and it's time to move on.
That's actually a very good point. And I think one of the steps that a lot of writers skip that they really should do is take the book and put it aside for a little while. Like when you think it's done, put it aside for, a couple weeks or a month, then give it one more quick read, because at that point you're reading it more as a reader. You're going to catch a lot of these little things that might be left. And it's not quite as frustrating, but yeah, if you just go at it, you're going to burn yourself out on it, and you're going to miss 90% of the things that are going to be a problem for a reader down the road.
Yeah. So that's the advice. Throw your manuscript in the ocean, come back later and fish it out. If all you're doing is moving around commas, you're done.
You can symbolically throw
maybe
it.
not the ocean, maybe the backyard somewhere, someplace where you can get it a little bit easier.
Just bury it under a tree.
Put it in a literal box. Buy a box. Put it in a box.
Awesome. Okay, JD, who is up next week?
Next week, we've got Michelle Chouinard coming on. She's a USA Today bestselling author of 8 mysteries under various pen names, and her latest novel is called The Serial Killer Guide to San Francisco, which releases September 24th. Michelle Chouinard.
Oh, that sounds excellent. I'll have to visit San Francisco after. If you'd like to be notified as soon as new episodes publish, make sure you go to writersincpodcast.com and sign up now. We'll see you next episode, and have a great week of writing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Writers Inc. Access the show notes and leave a comment at writersincpodcast.com.